G'day, ZiggyD here, and recently I travelled to the USA to attend the Borderlands 3 hands-on demo event. In this video I want to share my in-depth review of my 5 hours of playtime with the game, how it's shaping up, and whether it's a solid follow-up to the much beloved Borderlands franchise. First though, it is important context to disclose that 2K covered the expenses of the trip, so flights, food and accommodation. This included a chicken sandwich that was quite tasty, and a $6 can of Pepsi from my room's minibar. Sorry about that, by the way, 2K. I was a little bit desperate that night. As always, however, I'll do my best to provide my honest thoughts and opinions, but it's good to have the context that myself and all the content creators were well looked after at the event, and such things influence how much fun we have on these trips overall, and thus can influence our perceptions of the game. My very simple and spoiler-free thoughts before I go into too much detail here is that this looks like a very solid follow-up to Borderlands 1 and 2. I had a lot of fun with it, and I really wanted to play more at the conclusion of each play session. Borderlands 3 seems to be focusing in on the things that we loved about the earlier games and adding more diversity and variety in the guns, builds, and a big focus on engaging in more fluid combat. It seems like it's set to be an extremely solid follow-up for core fans of the series. Now, it's important to note that a demo like this only really allows us to get an idea of the base gameplay. It's not a full endorsement of the game at this point, this early out. We get a good idea of such things as, what do the guns feel like, what sort of skills there are, how is the combat, and what it's like doing storyline missions and so on. Some issues, however, may only end up presenting themselves after 10, 20, or 30 hours in. These can be issues such as things like endgame and longevity, like we saw in the pre-sequel. But as far as those more core gameplay elements go, this was a very strong first showing for the game, and the demo was very well polished overall. I've actually been feeling the drive to be really nitpicky and going out of my way to find things I didn't like simply because I'm aware that I had a really good time with the game, and I'm trying to counterbalance that with some good criticism. But honestly, it looks so good on these first impressions, and it's been difficult to find major flaws with what I've played so far, at least as far as the game itself goes. And on that note, while I mostly just want to focus on the game here in this review, I'd be remiss in not mentioning that there are some issues with things outside of the game itself. So let's get that out of the way before I dive into more detail on the game specifically. So firstly, on PC, Borderlands 3 will be exclusively hosted on the Epic Store for 6 months. There have been a number of valid concerns about the Epic Store itself, and Epic's approach to securing exclusives has not been in the best interest of consumer choice. The exclusivity will be a deal breaker for some PC gamers. I think that it's up to each person to decide whether it's a deal breaker for them or not. For me personally, I don't like it, but it's not quite a deal breaker for me. Content creators have been offered things like codes and affiliate deals to promote pre-ordering, and I don't personally feel comfortable engaging in things like promoting pre-orders for Epic at this stage. I just don't think that it does you guys any favors, so I won't be sharing any Epic Store affiliate codes or anything like that. However, I will likely be playing the game at launch and covering the game itself if it proves to be as good as it's looking so far. I'm also not a huge fan of pre-order bonuses in general, especially when they subvert the gameplay experiences in XP and loot boosts or starter items. This is a whole industry thing, overall. Thankfully, Borderlands does at least seem to take the least damaging approach to these by making them items that you quickly replace or that you can also find in-game. I don't personally like them much, but I can just not use them, so it's not really that big a deal. The final drama, I guess I'll say, was the miscommunication surrounding microtransactions during the live stream event. Randy Pitchford said that there wouldn't be microtransactions, but there would be skins available for purchase. This whole thing was a weird error that ended up getting quite a bit of press. What was weird is that the livestream was actually the third time Randy and crew did that same presentation, and I saw the earlier ones, I was there the day before. And in those, Randy more correctly said that there would be skins, but no loot boxes or pay-to-win microtransactions for sale specifically. Overall, miscommunications aside, the actual monetization model for Borderlands 3 seems quite good to me. Box price and skins with larger DLCs post-launch like they've done in the past. All of this sits quite fine with me, don't have any problems with any of that, seems pretty good compared to the industry at large, I think. Though Randy and team could have handled the communication better live on the day. So overall, there's a few things I don't like surrounding the game, but nothing that's a deal breaker for me personally, so long as the game is good. I encourage you guys to make up your own minds. So that was a bigger sidetrack than I wanted, but it's good to have everything covered, and with that done, let's get into some actual detail about the game itself. Firstly, the loot. The most important aspect, really. The guns in Borderlands 3 are widely and consistently awesome. They've really upped a ton here in terms of diversity and just general fun factor. The weapon manufacturer system in Borderlands have always meant things like when you pick up a Jacob's weapon versus a TDR or a Maliwan, you know you're getting something with some differences in what they do well and how they handle. This feature has been turned up to 11 here in Borderlands 3, and never have the different weapon brands felt so different. Each brand has had a lot more added to what makes them special, and in the 5 hours I played, I picked up and used dozens of weapons at least, and all of them were super different each time. A good example of the level of added depth to the manufacturers we're seeing in Borderlands 3 is TDR, I think. Originally, these were themed as cheap weapons that weren't super strong but had a high reload speed, later becoming disposable by allowing you to throw the weapon away and have it explode, with a new one being replicated in your hand. Now TDR weapons follow this disposable idea, but not only will they explode when thrown, but you can now have ones that turn into seeking missiles after exploding, bouncing grenades, and even mobile turrets that shoot at enemies before exploding. So they all follow this disposable tech theme, but there's a ton more variety in what that means and how you play. With the mobile turrets, for example, you might barely shoot at enemies and instead focus on throwing out a bunch of turrets that'll seek out and kill enemies for you like a minion pet build. Another really fun weapon feature that's added a lot to the combat is that many brands now also have different firing modes. For Maliwan, for example, this is usually the ability to change between elemental damage types. So you might have a charge-up shotgun that has both lightning and fire modes, which means you can use your lightning to strip shields and then switch to fire to burn the flesh, making the weapons far more versatile overall. Dial features guns that swap between burst, auto, or semi-automatic modes depending on the weapon, so these can be great for different ranged engagements. I even found a sniper rifle that had two separate sights, a hollow sight for automatic firing and a scope for semi-auto sniping, which is just super cool. Vladof guns had regular firing modes with under-barrel attachments like grenade or missile launchers, which are always a big hit. And Torgue, of course, had explosions, explosive rounds that could be fired in impact mode or a higher damage but delayed sticky bomb mode that dealt more damage the more sticky bombs you stuck to a single target. All of these things made weapons so much more exciting to find and try out, and it made the combat far more interesting as you would be changing fire modes, changing weapons, using abilities, and picking the right tool for each engagement. Finding new weapons was always a strength of Borderlands, but this is a whole new level here. Also, it was really impressive to see the attention to detail in gun models and animations being tied to all these different firing modes and manufacturer nuances. I cannot gush enough about how fun and cool the guns felt, which is, I think, pretty bloody important for a Borderlands game. Following this trend of greater diversity and more fun and fluid combat was the skills and builds. There's been some data mining already for the different skill trees for Zane and Amara, so feel free to go check those out if you want some detail there. But the trees seem to have a bit more meat to them than in previous titles, and I was already getting excited about builds from what I saw. Even though I didn't have that long to really look at the skill trees because I was too focused on just playing as much as I could in the time that I had. I saw some fun things like Zane having skills that launch out his grenades when he fires the first shot from his weapon, or fire his grenades from his drone or digiclone. And this got me excited for things like finding fun combinations of weapons that have either small clip size or encourage reloading like TDR weapons, as well as things like considering how my grenade mod choice would synergize with the grenade spam that was happening as a result. A grenade spamming Zane build seems like it'll be quite fun. I played both Amara and Zane across my 3 demo sessions. I did about 5 hours in total. Zane was my favorite overall because of his flexibility and fun combat scenarios like dropping a digiclone, flanking an enemy, unloading all your magazines, and then teleport swapping with your clone to get back to safety so that you can reload. It just felt you felt clever doing it, I guess. It's good when a game makes you feel clever. My big takeaway from Amara, on the flip side, was just how much I hated playing Brick by comparison. I'm sorry, Brick fans. I tried him for the first time recently in Borderlands 1, and oh man, I could not handle it. In Borderlands 3, you get the choice between 3 active abilities now, as well as having multiple modifiers for those powers, and all of Amara's were both snappy and fun to use, as well as viable for more hit-and-run melee gameplay. It's a big improvement over the screaming, screen-shaking, blinding particle fest that was playing Brick as a melee build. Giving players a choice of 1 of 3 abilities, or up to 2 of 3 for Zane, is another diversity add that, along with the deeper skill trees, should see a ton more builds and playstyles across each of the different classes. So it's good to see that there's likely going to be some more depth in that area. Another thing that related to the combat is that the fights generally felt a bit more intense than what I remember from previous games. This is due in part, I think, to a more constant and better designed enemy spawn system. Instead of being just waves, with maybe like a gap between them occasionally, it's more of a constant flow of enemies, likely triggered as you kill each enemy, or at least on some sort of intelligently designed timer, I'm not entirely sure. But there wasn't as much downtime in fights where you're looking for something to do. There was always something happening in the fights. Another aspect was that enemy design seems to be a bit deeper too, with enemies using more abilities, like the flash troopers teleporting around, and big daddies locking down areas with AoE abilities, and enemies with shields requiring you to flank and move around them a lot more, lest they reflect your bullets back at you. Overall, there's just much more interesting combat on both sides of the equation. I got asked a lot about vehicles from my impressions, whether they've been improved in that, and if I'm actually being honest here, I kind of wish Borderlands had less vehicle stuff. I don't know, do you guys feel this too, or am I kind of alone in this one? I just kind of wish that levels were smaller, with vehicle stuff only being in certain fun areas to break up the gameplay. Like, I played Borderlands 1 recently with my partner Amy, and there was this mission that had you going around a racetrack, killing enemies in your cars, and I was like, that's super fun, I love that vehicle stuff, but just the mandatory traveling around with vehicles, I don't really enjoy. So Borderlands 3 still seems to have a bunch of vehicles and wide open areas that see their uses, mandatory I'll say, but it does seem to be a bit better. Firstly, the cycle bikes were way faster and drifted nicely around corners, so I quite liked using those. I felt like I was getting around a little more quickly and it was a bit more fun. So that helped me cover some ground and enjoy doing so. And secondly, there is a lot more vehicle choice now, with the ability to hijack and find special vehicles you can take back to unlock parts you can use in the future. So I think it's better, but it still has a big presence in the game, which I'm just not personally a huge fan of. And this kind of ties in with one of my nitpicky gripes, I guess. There is at times a bit too much backtracking for side missions. In the first large open level area we're in the demo, you have to backtrack a lot to do some of the side quests and turn them in. Thankfully, the fast travel system is pretty decent and vastly improved from what I remember, at least. And you can fast travel to certain points around the map, and even your vehicle from the map screen, which I really liked. But ultimately, even with that ability, I still felt like some side quests were a bit too far away and I had to do a bit of running or vehicle work to get some more gameplay going. More fast travel points you can unlock could solve this and lower the downtime a bit, I think. Graphics and visuals seem to have jumped up a bit too, though I'm hearing people kind of like arguing on either side of the fence here. The live streams were set up a little wrong, I think, and were too dark due to color range, I suspect, on the OBS settings. So I don't think that this came through in the streams as well as it could have. But it looks to me, at least from playing it, it's a solid improvement, with the most notable thing being some really nice lighting on explosions and things like that. It definitely looks like Borderlands still. It's the same art style and everything, which I've always kind of liked. Some people maybe not so much. But it does seem to have been brought into the modern era at least decently in terms of that lighting and stuff. I'm honestly not sure how well it'll carry through in the footage you guys will see on YouTube and Twitch, but I felt like it looked quite good in game. Ultimately, it looks very familiar, and the art style is still that Borderlands, not cel-shaded, but kind of still looks like its style. So it'll be familiar. Sounds I did notice, however, they seem to be quite improved, most notably with the weapons having a lot more variety and some of them having a lot more oomph to them. There were a few that were a bit flat, but a lot of the weapons sounded way better, I think. As I understand it, what's going on in the background is there's a lot more sound effects and modifiers in the game engine compared to previous titles, like tons more, and the game engine can put them together depending on the weapon's type, brand, barrel, receiver, and so on, like the different parts of the weapon. So it's almost like procedurally generated sound, it seems, for the weapons. And this could end up having the results of some combinations kind of sounding a bit meh, but there will be a ton more difference in weapon sounds at least. And overall, this was a plus over previous games, I thought. Side quests were pretty fun from what I did maybe 5 or 6 of them, and all of them had the expected goof or gag at some point in their mission. Some spoilers here, but things like extract some blood from the doctor, oops, I chopped off his arm, sort of things, you know, typical Borderlands sort of stuff. Fun, goofy, and slightly lame at times humor has always been the Borderlands brand, and it felt pretty on the mark here, so if you've enjoyed it in the past, it'll be, you know, it'd be more of that here, I think. One more big thing I wanted to mention that I didn't get to play with in the demo, but it looks exciting from the reveal stream, is the idea that we're going to be traveling via spaceship to different systems and planets. I think this is pretty big here. Following this whole trend that seems to be the case for Borderlands 3 of just a lot more diverse gameplay, I'm very excited to see what this offers, and I hope that there's some really different feeling planets for us to visit. Like, for example, I don't know how you guys felt about pre-sequels, Lower Gravity, but I kind of liked it. And I think it would be cool if we at least go to one planet with lower gravity for us to jump and float around in. I don't know, maybe that's a somewhat unpopular opinion. Anyway, overall, it felt like it was just more. More guns, more things the guns did, more skills, more diverse combat, and, well, just more Borderlands. That last part, I think, would have been enough for many people. I went into this with the mindset of, if this is just more Borderlands 2 with slightly prettier and slightly updated gameplay, then I would have been pretty happy, and I think my expectations have been exceeded here. Loot and Shoot, honestly, has been a bit of a sad, mixed bag lately, so I'm keen for this game to be a solid entry into the genre. There's still a lot more for us to actually see to know for sure how the game's going to be at launch overall and with longevity and things like that. Like what's happening with the end game, what's the deal with seasons, how good is the longer term loot hunting going to be, and so on. Questions like that will need answers over the coming months to be sure that Borderlands 3 will live up to its hype, but so far, for a first hands-on demo, this was a very strong opening for Borderlands 3. Anyhow, if you guys have any thoughts or questions, please leave them in the comments below. I am keen to discuss the game in greater detail with you guys down there. And I have a good 5 hours of footage, so if you're interested in seeing anything in more specific detail, let me know about it, and I'll see if I can put a video together for you. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching. It's burger time! Burger delivery! Burger delivery! That's so stupid.